This nugget, focused on project initiation, is the first of 5 nuggets that readdresses the 5 project management process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing, and puts them back into perspective now that we've been through the 8 core knowledge areas associated with project management. So again, project initiation, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling are our 5 project management processes. They happen throughout the project itself. We repeat these 5 project management processes for each phase of the life cycle, ensuring that the project is properly initiated, or the phase is properly initiated, planned, executed, monitored, and controlled, and closed. What happens inside each of these process groups is the appropriate components of each one of the knowledge areas. So the appropriate components of scope, the appropriate components of time, the appropriate components of cost, and so on, are brought to life, are actually delivered by you, the project team, during project delivery in these 5 project management processes. In this nugget, as I said, we're going to focus on project initiation. In project initiation, our focus is on developing the project charter, ensuring the high-level view for the project, ensuring the high-level definition, the business requirements are defined at sufficient level that it's relatively clear, and I deliberately use relatively clear. It's not the final detailed project scope statement, but it's the project charter outlining the project requirements, and it's the preliminary feasibility study assessing that the project makes sense. Once we have confirmation on the project charter, once we have confirmation on what the project is expected to achieve, we would then go through and deliver and develop the preliminary scope statement. I like to describe the preliminary scope statement as the 30,000-foot level scope statement. It's not the detailed scope statement. We're going to get to that in our next nugget on planning. But it's the 30,000-foot level scope statement. Philosophically, conceptually, if the project does X, Y, and Z, does this satisfy your requirements? It's not the details of what is in X, Y, and Z, but it's philosophically, fundamentally, at the 30,000-foot level, if we satisfy X, Y, and Z, have we satisfied that your project will achieve your business expectations? That's what initiating is all about. It's ensuring that the right projects get initiated. And more importantly, it's ensuring that the wrong projects, the ones that don't have justification in the organization, the ones that cost too much money, the ones that truly aren't committed to the overall organizational strategies, do not get started. It's validating that the right projects get initiated and ensuring that the wrong projects do not get initiated. I like to describe project initiation as validation of the eureka moment. What do I mean by the eureka moment? A business sponsor has an idea. I like to describe it as has an idea in the shower, has an idea in the car on the way to work. You know, I'm having a challenge in my business in situation A. If we were to develop a new project, if we were to implement a new project that could do functions E, F, and G, my business problem would go away. Therefore, I think I need a project to do just that. That's the eureka moment. It's based on business sound. It's based on business justification, but there's not a lot of thought. There's not a lot of detail into that. It's the eureka moment in the shower. It's the eureka moment in traffic on the way to work. Project initiation takes that eureka moment and puts a little more flesh to it. It takes that eureka moment and ensures that, yes, it is truly a business problem as opposed to a current pain, like an ongoing, enduring business problem, as opposed to a current moment of pain that the business sponsor is having. And it validates that the justification, it validates that the end results from the project will truly satisfy the eureka issues, the pain issues, that the project truly does make sense. Again, it's validating that the right projects get initiated and validating that the wrong projects Great eureka moment. We don't want to stop our business managers from having eureka moments, but we want to take those eureka moments and validate them. That's what project initiation is all about. In more detail, initiating is all about defining the business need, truly understanding exactly what the business requirements are. Again, at the 30,000 foot level, remembering we're still in initiating, we're not in detailed planning, but we need to understand the business requirements, the business need, at sufficient level of detail at the 30,000 foot level to ensure that our project is going to be able to satisfy the requirements. It's no good initiating a project to do X if it's impossible to do X, or if the cost or time to do X is going to be so prohibitive that the business will not sponsor it. So it's critical that you understand the business need. Even more critical is the identification of the project sponsor. You need to identify up front, before the project starts, before planning even starts, who the project sponsor is. The project sponsor needs to be a business unit person. The sponsor must be from the business. The sponsor must have sufficient authority. The sponsor must have sufficient budget. The sponsor must have sufficient power to ensure that your project will be a success. Having a valid business need is great, but until you have a business sponsor, someone with the will, someone with the power, someone with the budget, someone with the ear of the senior management for the organization, if you want to look at it that way, to ensure the project gets the attention, the money, the resources that it needs to be a success, your project will never be a success. The sponsor must be identified, and the sponsor must be the right sponsor. Power, authority, need. Ideally, in initiating, you will assign the project manager. You yourself will get assigned to the project during initiating, and you will carry through the project until termination. Assigning the project management earlier than later is very important. The PMBOK insists that the project manager is assigned during the initiation process. I agree 100% with that PMBOK definition. The earlier the project manager is assigned to the project, the more ownership, the more understanding, the more continuity, the more the project will have. So as the PMBOK insists upon, I agree, assigning the project manager is an activity that should take place during initiating. Unfortunately, my experience has been, and maybe I've just worked with all of the wrong companies, my experience has been that the initiating process often happens either without a focused project manager. It's simply a series of activities that happens within the business to get the project approved, or the project manager assigned during initiating is not the project manager who carries through and delivers the project simply because of other commitments, simply because of potential time lapse between when the project initiation processes take place. The project is initiated, the project charter is prepared, presented to senior management in a series of time. It may be weeks, it may be months within the organization before the project is officially approved and we go into the planning process. So often the project manager involved with initiation has gone on to other projects, and a new project manager is assigned to carry on and fulfill the project. Acceptable, but not ideal. Ideally, a project manager is assigned during initiation, and that project manager carries that project through to final termination. Once we have the sponsor identified, once we have the project manager identified, and we have the business needs documented at the appropriate level, we need to identify who the project stakeholders are. It's great to say we have the sponsor with the power, the authority, the money. We need to know who the other significant stakeholders are going to be. Who truly cares about this project? Who's going to be impacted by this project? And probably as important, or maybe even more important, who are the opponents to this project? Who truly would prefer to have this project not be initiated? Who would prefer to have the funds for this project diverted to their business unit? You need to go through and identify all of the stakeholders, people impacted by, people who can favorably support your project, and people who will potentially negatively support your project. Get those identified so you can start to take the appropriate actions during the initiation process to support and manage the supportive stakeholders and to manage and encourage the non-supportive stakeholders. This is all part of justifying the project, ensuring that the eureka moment that we just discussed is justifiable, that the project is reasonable, that it is doable, that the funding for the project is available, that the cost justification for the project, the cost-benefit analysis is realistic, and that senior management will truly buy in and support the project. That's what initiating is all about. The challenge I've had with initiating in my career to date is often many of these steps are not, and I'm going to say formally done in the organization. They are done, but they are done informally, and they are often done outside of the project management structure. The definition of the business need, often done within the business unit itself, often done without direct project support. The business manager simply says, I have a requirement, I'm going to go through, I'm going to champion this, I'm going to work this internally in the organization to get approval to proceed, and will take that business need to the point that they have, again, the approval to proceed. So initiating has happened, per se, but only from the business viewpoint. The initiating has not happened from the project viewpoint, and all of the extra components that we need to be successful as a project may or may not have happened. The identification of the stakeholders, again, often happens prior to what I would call the formal project management process. While the business unit is going through defining their business need, they will be going through and identifying at least the majority stakeholders, maybe not all of the stakeholders, but they will be going through and identifying the majority stakeholders. And with the business need in hand and with the stakeholders in hand, they will go off to senior management and solicit approval for the project. So 3 of our 5 components for initiating often can happen outside of the project cycle itself. They happen within the organization. It may be part of a strategic planning process. It may be part of an overall business unit planning process. But many projects are initiated. Many projects get to the point of justification / preliminary approval well outside of the project management processes themselves. If you are brought in to develop a project plan based on these external initiation process where the business need is identified, the stakeholders are identified, and the project is justified, I would recommend you do a very brief initiating process to validate that the business need is still realistic. Time may have passed. It may have been 2 months, 4 months, 6 months from the point that the strategic plan was developed, the business unit plan was developed, and the project finally gets approval. Has the business need changed at all? Do we need to revalidate, re-justify the project? Again, as time has changed, stakeholders may change, or again, because it's the business unit that developed the original project justification, potentially, and I'm not trying to be insulting to the business unit, but potentially the stakeholders they identified were more micro-focused on their particular business unit and what impact to their business unit is going to be, as opposed to the more global-focused stakeholder analysis to understand who the global corporate stakeholders are going to be. So again, I would suggest when you're brought in with initiating already in place or done or pseudo-done, that you review and do the mini initiation process, reevaluate who the stakeholders are. Absolutely ensure that you have the right sponsor. My experience has been when pre-initiation happens, that there's not a true identification of a business sponsor. You may have a business unit manager who defined the business need, secured commitment for the project, but are they truly the right sponsor? Do they have the power? Do they have the authority? Do they have the desire for the project to succeed? Or are they simply the wrong person in the organizational chain? As we've discussed several times through this series of nuggets, the sponsor is critical. They must be the right person with the right skills, with the right knowledge, with the right power, with the right budget to ensure the project is a success. And my experience has been often pre-initiated projects, the sponsor is not well identified. The sponsor may not even be the right person. And obviously when you've brought in, the assignment of the project manager component has taken place, so that is in place after the pre-initiation. Bottom line, initiating is a critical process. We need to ensure these steps are done. Often many of these steps are done pre-initiating. You as a project manager need to go through and review, not redo, but review these steps to ensure that the passage of time, that the identification of additional information through a more complete, more thorough analysis by the identification of the appropriate sponsor, that there have not been subtle changes to the overall project requirements, and re-solicit justification for the project, re-solicit approval for the project. The first of the two deliverables we're going to produce as part of initiating is the project charter. The project charter defines the business requirements. The project charter defines the project from the business viewpoint. The project charter should be absolutely focused on the business activities, the business requirements, what the business hopes to achieve from the project, what the benefits the business will get from the project. So as with any formal deliverable, and this is a formal deliverable, we need to include an introduction. The high-level executive summary, if you want to use that terminology, describing what the project charter is all about. You need to recognize that the project charter is going to go very high in the organization. You need to spend significant time, significant attention to crafting the project charter well. You need to ensure that the project charter is well written, and that probably most importantly, this introduction, this executive summary, is well written, is a very powerful, very complete executive summary in 1 to 2 pages, absolutely outlines everything about the business requirements and everything about the project to ensure that it receives the attention of senior management and that it receives the attention it needs to get the approval to proceed to the next stage, which is planning. Although you, the project manager, are typically going to be responsible for developing the project charter, you need to develop the project charter in absolute harmony with your business sponsor. The business sponsor is the person with the need, the business sponsor is the person with the pain that needs the project to satisfy. You need to work with that business sponsor to develop this project charter. The main component to the project charter is going to be the business objectives. Here is the business requirements. Here are the current problems that are being encountered in the business. Here are the anticipated recommendations. Here are the recommended solutions for the project. Here is how the business is going to benefit from the project. Again, this business objective needs to identify the problems, the solutions, and the benefits. Why is our company going to be more successful? Why is our company going to provide better customer service? Why is our company going to be more financially successful? Why is our company going to be able to increase sales, decrease inventory costs? Whatever the benefits are going to be needs to be, again, very clearly, very succinctly defined in the project charter. We're sending this to senior management. We are soliciting their approval to proceed to get a project initiated. And my experience is any document that you send up the chain to senior management for approval must absolutely contain a cost-benefit statement. It's wonderful to say we have a business problem and we have solutions and here are the benefits, but management isn't going to approve, or at least my experience with management is, they're not going to approve any document for committing of funds, committing of resources, until they know what the overall cost benefit is going to be. If I spend $50,000, $200,000, $300,000 on this project, am I going to get my money back? Is it a 1-year payback, a 2-year payback, a 5-year payback? a payback based on tangible benefits, a payback based on intangible benefits? How will I know that I am taking the right actions, committing the right financial resources, committing the right human resources to the project to ensure that the project is going to succeed? The project charter is your first communication to senior management that says there is a business problem, we need a project to satisfy that business problem, and with this preliminary cost-benefit statement, we have a solution to the business problem. My recommendation is, and this may not be appropriate in all organizations, is you need to get formal approval, i.e. a signature line, and on that signature line, I, the project manager, will sign my name. What a signature, eh? There will be another signature line where the business sponsor will sign their name. So I think it's important in a project charter that the authors will sign their name that says, we believe in this document, we support this document by affixing our signature to this document. I, Steve Casely, I, business sponsor, agree that this is a valid, realistic, I'm putting my name to it, I'm putting my signature to it, and then there needs to be additional signature lines for senior management. I, senior management, I, CEO, CIO, CFO, commit my company to a project that's going to achieve these business objectives based on this preliminary cost-benefit analysis. This project makes absolute sense to me. This is the right way for my company to spend its money, to commit its resources. The project charter is the first formal document that your project is going to produce. Produce it with care. Make sure that introduction, that executive summary, is powerful. It's going up the chain to senior management. I hope they're going to read the whole document, but maybe sometimes senior management is going to accept your recommendations. Again, you put your signature on it, your recommendation, and is going to focus only on that executive summary, that introduction. Submit it, put the signatures on it, and we're not just looking for the signature for the formal approval from senior management. We're expecting you and the business sponsor to put your signature on it too, that says, I stake my reputation on this project charter. This project charter is well prepared. I believe in the results. I want my company to initiate a project to satisfy these business requirements. The second and final deliverable from initiating is the preliminary scope statement. The preliminary scope statement will start where the project charter left off and provide more detail on how the project is going to satisfy the business requirements. We don't typically start the preliminary scope statement until the project charter has been presented to management and approved by management. So it's sort of an iterative stage of approval to move forward in initiating so that we can get final approval. Sounds like there's a lot of approvals going on, but remember, you may be talking about committing very large amounts of corporate resources to a project. You need to ensure that the approvals are happening at the appropriate levels, that you're not pre-committing, pre-spending money that the organization should be focusing elsewhere. So again, once the project charter is approved, we will then go through and take it from the 30,000 foot level possibly down to the 20,000 foot level. We are still in initiating. We're not in detailed planning, but we need to provide a little more detail, a little more justification to the project. So the first step will be the current situation. A large component for the current situation should be able to be extracted directly from the project charter. What is the current business problem? Again, you may want to provide a little more detail into this. This is going to be the preliminary document that's going to feed into your detailed project plan. So what are all of the problems as opposed to the high-level problems that would be documented in the project charter? Once you understand the current situation, what is in place now, what's working, what's broken, what needs to be fixed, what are the future requirements that are required by the business, we can start to define what the project scope itself is. Here in the preliminary scope statement, we're calling it project requirements, but it's really the scope. What does this bread box look like? How big is the bread box? What's the bread box going to be made out of? How is the bread box going to be used? We're developing the preliminary scope statement for our project. How is the new inventory management system going to operate? What other subsystems does the inventory management need to work with? Who are going to be the primary users? What business units are going to be affected by it? We're defining the specific project requirements. Based on that, you go to your project manager kit box and you develop a high-level project schedule. Why do I refer to the project manager kit box? You need some support to develop this preliminary project schedule. Remember, we're still in preliminary. We have not developed a detailed work breakdown structure. We're at the preliminary stage. Based on experience in my organization, a project of this magnitude would take 3 months in analysis, 6 months in design, 10 months in development. Based on my experience, or based on industry experience, or based on estimating parameters I have gotten from the internet, or from trade periodicals, or from that's your project manager's toolbox, you're going to develop the preliminary project schedule that says phase 1, 6 months. Phase 2, 9 months. Phase 3, and so on. It's more detail to support the preliminary cost-benefit statement that you put together in the project charter, but it's not a complete WBS that's going to be developed in project planning itself. Critical at this point is to document the assumptions and constraints. Here are the assumptions that I've made. This system is going to be based on these 4 business functions. Here's the assumption that I've made. There will be a package to satisfy 2 functions, etc. Here are the constraints. This system must be in place before year end. You're starting to define the specific assumptions that you've done in preparing your preliminary scope. You're starting to define specific constraints that the business have in place for the project to be successful. And leading directly from that is the identification of the preliminary project risks. Based on the information I have at hand now, while I've developed the preliminary scope statement, here are the risks. I think there is a technology risk. I think there is a training risk. I think there is a business acceptance risk. I think there is a financial, economic risk. You're starting to identify the preliminary. Remember, watch your level of detail. You're still in initiating, you're still in preliminary, but you're trying to provide sufficient clarity to ensure that the final acceptance of the initiating process, that the final approval to proceed into detailed planning is based on a great deal of reality to ensure that you're not initiating the wrong projects, to ensure that you're initiating only the right projects. And again, my suggestion, at the completion of preliminary scope statement, you have again the signature lines. I, Steve Casely, I, the sponsor, I, senior management, approve this preliminary scope statement. I agree that it makes sense to spend $75,000. I agree that it makes sense to spend 14 months to deliver a project, to develop a project that's going to satisfy, deal with the current situation, that's going to make our company more successful, more profitable, more customer focused. Whatever the business issue, the business pain point is going to be, this is how your project is going to satisfy it. In this nugget, project initiation, the first of a series of 5 nuggets on the conclusion of the project management process groups, we focused on the steps involved with initiating, ensuring that the right projects get initiated, ensuring that the wrong projects do not get initiated. We accomplished that by developing the project charter, which defines the business requirements, defines exactly what the project will accomplish and what benefits the project will get from that. Based on formal approval of the project charter, we go on and we develop the preliminary scope statement, the 30,000 foot level scope statement defining the preliminary schedule, the preliminary risks, the preliminary statement of how the project will satisfy the business requirements identified in the project charter. The project charter is focused on business requirements. The preliminary scope statement is focused on how the project will satisfy the requirements. Again, this is the first of a series of 5 nuggets on the 5 project management process groups. These project management process groups refocus the attention of each one of our knowledge areas, scope, time, cost, quality, and put it into a project process to ensure we're doing the right steps, that we're initiating the right projects. In the next nugget, we'll focus on we're planning the projects, and so on, putting the project management knowledge areas that we focused on throughout this nugget series into action, into play in specific project situations. This concludes our nugget on project initiation. I hope this video has been informative for you.